There you go.
How are y'all doing, insiders? Welcome, everyone. He's talking. Do you think? He's talking about that a little bit about the. Do you think they understood? You think Ric Flair and the rest of them? Do you think they understood that they wasn't putting people over? And it was.
Yes.
Do you think they got it?
Yes, they
Hmm.
most certainly did because they didn't want to lose their spot. Most
Yep.
certainly did. They were desperate, it seemed like. But that's the reason you have to have somebody in the strong position, the top position, say, no, we've got to develop these new people. And the thing about it is, they didn't realize it, but they were shooting themselves in their own foot. They were shooting themselves in the foot. It was
Listen, I
quite
get
sad.
guys all the time now, older guys calling me wanting to get a spot, with Russell South, and that's what I tell them is, hey, yeah, because we need some guys to come in and build these young guys and put them over, and that's
Sure,
the end of the conversation. They're not
sure,
interested in that.
sure. But they don't realize. Okay, I'll give an example. DiBiase was working in Mid South. Okay, and he knew that he wasn't going to be on top because Junkyard Dog was the man. Everybody knew it. I mean,
Yep.
it was hot. And so DiBiase said, I'm not going to ever be in the main event. The only way I'm going to be on the main event is if I work against Junkyard Dog. And so that's what he did. And it was a smart move on his part. And just because somebody else is coming up, that gives you another person to work with. It's not that they're taking your place. They're not taking your place. They're giving you somebody else to work with. There's only so many times Hulk Hogan could work with Ric Flair. It's just so many times.
Yeah, Terrence Hardy, how you doing, sir? Good to see you on here. Richard said, guys, do you believe when guys say they train themselves? Well, it's I don't believe anybody ever trains themselves, but there are guys that didn't have any training when they started wrestling. Oh, and they learned by wrestling. I don't know
Yeah,
if they.
Well,
yeah,
and like we were saying, they learned by wrestling experienced people.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you got two guys and they're wrestling each other, and they're sitting there. They can't figure out why things are not getting over. They're doing everything they see on TV. It's not getting over. It's not getting
yep,
over. Bottom line is, they're not over. That's the
right,
key.
exactly.
They're not over.
Stuart Kemp said, "Pin me, pay me." Not everyone
Okay.
believed in that though. I remember one time,
I'll be right back.
uh,
Okay.
Morton, what was his name? Not Ricky. Todd Morton was going against Danny Davis. Todd Morton, you remember Dad went back there. He said, "Hey Todd, about 10 minutes into the deal, he's going to hit you with whatever Danny's finish was. I can't remember what it was. The flying, I don't know, whatever it was. I can't remember what his finish was. And he said, well, can't we do a time limit draw?"
Yes. Yes.
And Danny Davis said, well, I guess we'll just go out there and have a match, see who wins. And let's be honest with you, Todd Morton wasn't going to beat Danny Davis. So
We like we said, a lot of this like we said, the latter 80s is when all this started.
Yeah.
This consolidation, and they knew it. The wrestlers knew that the ball was in their court and they were going to go with it. Now, not to say that I don't, like I said, that's the name of the game, because in a wrestling business, you only have a few years. You're not. It's very unusual for people wrestle 30 years. It's very unusual.
Very.
There's been people that has, but
Yeah.
very unusual. Richard Hood said, I posed the question to Jack the other day. Do you believe that political correctness should be in pro wrestling?
Well, in a lot of ways, it always has been. I mean, we were not allowed language, back in the day. You can term that political correctness. I mean, we were, there were limits. I honestly don't see much of an issue. I mean, wrestling has always been mirrored to society, and that's a big thing in society today. So it has to be part of our industry if if we're going to attract certain people. And there are limits that we surpassed in the past because we were ignorant about. Now we know about them. So we can't do things like we used to do because they are offensive today. And I'm very. It takes a lot to offend me, but I still see stuff that offends me when they cuss on AEW or WWE right now. I get offended by that, and I'm no angel. I mean, if you want to sit down with a cigar and a beer sometime, you might be surprised at the things that come out of my mouth. But to the public, I don't put those things out there. I don't talk like that. I don't like to hear it sitting in my home because of what it's associated with. Now, if I'm watching an R-rated movie, I expect that. But if I'm watching professional wrestling, it still bothers me to hear stuff like that. So political correctness always been a part of it. Is it big in society now? Are people being, held accountable? I don't have a problem with that. I think everybody ought to be held accountable for if you screw up, you do things wrong. Yeah. I also think you ought to be allowed the opportunity to come back from that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Michael Barr, I think we already said hello to Michael Barr, didn't we? No, we didn't. All right. Hello, Michael.
Not here.
How you doing? Was there any good territorial wrestling from the Northwest states, right?
Oh yeah, that was Portland wrestling. Yeah, Mr. Owen had it rocking and rolling up there. Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff in that whole area up there. Roddy Piper was there. Buzz Sawyer, Brett Sawyer,
Rip Oliver.
Yeah,
Lynn Denton.
Buddy Rose. I mean, yeah, they had
Buddy Rose, man. Buddy Rose was fantastic. So many,
especially the young Buddy Rose. The young Buddy Rose would go. You remember when he came into WWE, and he was at that time he was a little larger, and he said he was 210 pounds.
Right. I love that.
Slim, trim, 210-pound Buddy Rose, but boy, he could still work. Yeah. I mean, he could still get out there and take the bumps, and he could take the hip tosses, and
could throw a drop kick that was unreal for a guy his size.
Yeah, I always liked him. I always thought he was a great worker. Never really got a push except for when he went to Oregon. I think that was.
AWA, he got a pretty good push.
That's right. Yeah. Rick Brooks is with us. All right, guys, y'all ready to do the breakdown of booking and what they call writing today? Y'all ready for that?
Yep.
Going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside and Out. We are going to look at what they would call booking in the territorial system. Then we're going to kind of look at what they call writers today. I don't even think they have bookers anymore. I don't think they're called bookers. No. I believe they're called show producers, aren't they?
Producers, agents, There's all kinds of terms for them, but they don't do the job that the booker did.
Let's look at and tear down a booking for a territory. Booking kind of started with the Gold Dust Trio. They were really the first people that actually took and put a storyline within a show. They kind of changed the wrestling business of what it was. And they changed it into a spectacle, not just one match, because you've got to remember we're doing a World Champion Series, and we see guys having 3-hour matches. There were one match on these cards. Well, these three, the Gold Dust Trio decided that, the matches don't need to be that long. We need to go 10, 15, 20 minutes, and we need to have return matches. Well, and what happened was, to me, this is what happened. And now I can see this happen. They went to a show one time, and a guy got thrown out of the ring, and he knocked himself out. And the guy got counted out, and the people went nuts. And they're sitting back in the back going, we're in Nebraska, Omaha next week. Man, that thing got over pretty good. You think we could ask Joe to fall out of there again and knock himself out again down there? Because they're sitting there thinking that got over.
Yeah.
And I believe that in their process, they said, this would be great. We could make return matches. We could do all. Very smart people. Gold Dust Trio, very smart people. Now, after they did that, there were several other people that picked up on it.
Yeah.
They were not the only. They were the first, but they wasn't the last of it. They wasn't the last of that. Now they're the ones that gave us all the job guy, and they're the ones that gave us all of that terminology because they used it to send the Western Union, because that's how they sent their finishes. They sent them through Western Union. I mean, that's the only way to send finishes back in those days. Why did they do that? Why didn't they just send one of the boys that was going to be working the show doing that?
Well, I guess it was better to send telegraph than smoke signals.
It's probably their way of verifying, so that if the finish was changed, some guy couldn't just claim, "Oh well, I got confused." You got it in writing right there. There's no backing out of that.
And everything was in code,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where the code comes from. That's where the wrestling code comes from. And by the way, when people call people job guys, it shouldn't have never been derogatory. Maybe they should have never told a wrestler what a job guy was.
Yeah.
And maybe that was the problem. They told it. But now
it had a different connotation back then too.
Yes.
Doing the job just meant you were going to lose that night.
Yeah, and really, when you became a part of the territory, you actually put someone over. You was not at the point you either put somebody over or you went over.
Yep.
One of the two. You did not do a job for someone, but for some reason, the wrestlers decided, you're doing a job. No, you're putting a guy over. You're part of the territory. You're going to be here at least 12 weeks. Back then you were going to at least be there 12 weeks unless you got over. But let's talk about Rodney. Let's look at the booking, and I'm going to ask you this question. What is the differences at this point today between the booker and what they're doing today, writing television? What is the difference? What do you see as the difference?
Well, writers really do not have to. They can write whatever they want to. They do not have to have results. Bookers absolutely had to have results, and being that a lot of their towns was every week, they could get instantaneous feedback on what they were doing. And the bottom line is, if you want to stay booker, you better put some butts in that seat. You don't know what you're doing. You better bring in the right talent. A lot of, and Michael Barr was asking a question, were there good bookers? The bookers could have come up with some good angles. It goes further than that. It was a collection of very talented people that they had with them, putting together, just like a football team, putting together a great crew. Case in point, Bill Dundee putting together a great crew to go to Mid-South with the Midnight Express, Jim Cornette, Buddy Landell. So the booker was more he came up with some great ideas, but you had to have great people, great talent to execute those ideas. Buddy Fuller was one of the best of going in and building up a territory. He would go in because he sold, I don't know how many territories over and over again in some cases, but he would have great talent, knew exactly what they were doing when they got out there. And yes, then he could put them in those great angles, but lots of times it was depending on who you had in the angle that was the most important part. You couldn't do that with people that were, nobody knew. They had to be over. So it was a very, very important. And like I said, it was, let me try something here. It doesn't work. You got to change it, because behind the booker is the man signing the checks and putting the money up. You don't produce, you and your crew is gone. They're gone. Whereas the writers of today, there is no incentive for them to excel. They write it, they please the boss, and that's all they need to do. Pleasing the fans, that's just secondary.
Jack?
Well, back in the day, to be a booker, to be an assistant booker, you had to have practical experience with the industry, because we're not like anything else. You can't equate us to Hollywood writers or a novelist or anything like that. If you haven't experienced that at some level of what we do, it's hard to understand what you're doing. And I think that is one of the biggest things that's missing today, is they're hiring these people from Hollywood. Vince made that point years ago. He didn't want experienced people. He wanted fresh ideas. Well, fresh ideas is what's got us where we're at, because those people don't have practical experience. They don't understand. They're in there envisioning guys doing things that are not physically possible to actually do. And bookers, myself, and people, that's experienced, we know what the limitations are. We know how to bring out the best in certain people. We know how to work with their strengths. We know how to hide their weaknesses. These guys just throw stuff out there, and if you can do it, you can do it. And if you can't, then they get blamed for it, not the writers. And that's where, to me, is the biggest disconnect between writers and bookers of the day, is that they've never been in there. They've never took a bump. They've never counted three on anybody. And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're at the show, but they don't even talk to the guys.
Yeah.
Roman Reigns is one of those few guys that has Vince's ear. And I think he has the best stuff going on today because he doesn't go through the writers. He doesn't have to clear anything. He sits down with Vince and they come up with all the stuff, between him and Paul Heyman, who I think Paul Heyman should be the guy that's over your entire product up there. Between him and Michael Hayes, they know everything about this industry. And if you're going to have writers, then everything should be filtered through them. Why that's not happening is beyond me. I don't know.
Yeah, and the thing about booking was if you were a smart booker back in the territory days, you would actually watch the matches that were being done.
Yep.
If you were a smart booker.
Yep.
Now, if you wasn't a smart booker, and let's say Nick Goulas came to you and said, "Hey, Lynn, did you watch that match between the interns and let's say Jackie and Don Fargo?" Well, yeah, I kind of watched it. Well, then what happened in that match? And if you didn't know what happened in that match, Nick Goulas was going to say, well, what happened is those thousands of people is going to be here. They're not going to be here next week because that match sucked.
Yep.
And people are not going to buy a ticket to come back and see that crap. And so he would tell you right up front that this would be on a Saturday. He said, next Saturday morning, you better shoot some angle. On Saturday morning, you better shoot something to make the people buy a ticket.
Exactly.
If not, I'm getting rid of you, and I'm bringing in Tom Ernesto.
Or I'll do it myself.
Yeah.
Or I'll do it myself.
Yeah. They would not take things being bad. Jim Barnett would not take things doing bad. People, Ole can take all the credit he wants to, but if Ole wasn't successful at what he did, he would have got rid of him. And there was a time that Ole was not successful in booking Atlanta. He did good from 1977, I believe, until the end of 1979. Things started going down. That's the reason that Ole left. Not because he was doing such a great job, because business was bad. Because Ole had done 3 years worth of booking. After 3 years, you're going to run out of ideals. You're going to start repeating yourself. Mid-South Wrestling did that. Bill Dundee started repeating himself in the Mid-South Wrestling, and that's the reason they started making a booking committee. They didn't want to get rid of Bill because that was the biggest year that Bill Watts ever had. But the booking of the shows was from show to show. There is no writer that's ever sits and probably watches a match. I doubt very seriously they're sitting and watching the matches.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't know what a good match was to begin with.
Yeah.
But back in the day, if that first guy in that first match, and let's say it was Wendell Cooley and he was getting over, with the booker would go, man, he's getting a good reaction. Well, he would get on there in the next morning and he'd start writing down Wendell Cooley. All right, let's put him. He's on the first match. Let's throw him on the third match. All right, and let's see how he gets over in that third match. Man, he got over pretty good. Okay, all right. I'm gonna move him into the fourth match, and before you know it, he's on the semi-main event because he got over. He was getting over with the fans, not because of anything the booker was doing, because of what Wendell Cooley was doing and how he got himself over. And it's very important, if you're a wrestler, make sure you know how to get yourself over, because the booker can only do so much. He can tell you what you got to do, but you still got to be able to get yourself over. And I think that is the difference between bookers, to me, and writers. I mean, that's just, Dutch Mantell was one of the greatest bookers of all time because he did that. That's how he watched it. And he would change stuff overnight. He said, man, I had this wrote out for TV, but I ain't doing that. That didn't get over, but this did. So this is what's going to take this place for that.
I remember Dutch talking about WWE years ago. Contacted him about coming in to help with the booking, and they wanted him to write out a 6-week scenario. And he said, well, I can do that. He said, but it don't mean anything. And the secretary that he was talking to said, what do you mean? He said, well, if I write out 6 weeks worth of stuff and the first week is okay, but the second week don't get over at all, he said, then whatever I was planning on doing ain't going to be done anymore. I'm changing everything. Yeah. And she said, well, that's not the way we do things here. And he said, well, maybe that's the problem.
Exactly right.
That is true. Yep, you know, booking was done. I'm going to tell you, booking was better in the 70s. If you go back and look at what was done in the 1970s, and I'm talking about up to 1979, for some reason in the 80s, it's like the promoters just lost their minds.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to them, but they did not spend the time. 1979 booking, I can remember Hulk Hogan being Sterling Golden, had the golden squeeze, and if you got out of it, you got $1,000.
Yep.
The Superstar did the Cobra hold, and if you get it out of that, you got $1,000.
$2,000.
Austin Idol put you in the figure for a lot like you get $1,000. 3 guys doing the
Las
same
Vegas leg lock.
Yes. Las Vegas leg lock.
You're exactly
3
right.
guys doing the same thing. Now, where was Jim Barnett? Where was the people saying, why are you doing this? Why are we doing 3 things? It's the same exact angle. It's the same kind of thing that we just do. Why are we doing this? And if you can see the progression and what happens to Atlanta because of that. Plus, Ole Anderson turning babyface was not a great idea. Right. By the way, it was never a good idea. Him and Lars kind of helped kill that territory. Bad matches, horrible matches. And I'd saying a lot about Ole.
I was there. I'll agree.
They were, but the problem was they really hated each other, so they were really going out there, and you couldn't sell it because they couldn't sell nothing. They just stand there because they'd hit each other so hard.
Yeah,
and you should make contact, but you can try to kill somebody. And they were trying to kill each other. Let's get some. There's a couple of people who asked some questions, and then we'll move on because we don't want this video to be too long. Booker's Stuart Kemp said Bookers were never friends with the boys. That's very important. Very important because you don't want to be just because you're the friend of somebody to book them on the main event and they don't draw.
I've made this statement today to the promoter that I have a lot of friends that are wrestlers, but I don't book very many of them.
And it's important. Okay, Michael Barr said, did a good booker or promoter pay attention to what was going on in his wrestlers' angles? Yes.
You had to. That was your job.
Yeah. Let's see. Richard Hood said, Brett, if Ole tells it, he was the greatest booker. Ole was good. Ole did some great stuff, but also as good of a stuff that he did in the 80s, he did even worse. As good as he did, by the time the 80s come along, he was doing some horrible things.
Yeah, and I'll say Ole was one of my favorite bookers. Now, was he the greatest booker? No, he wasn't the greatest booker. But I still emulate and copy a lot of the stuff that he does and the way he delivered himself. I still do that.
But at the same time, Ole gives nobody any other credit.
Yeah.
Ron West was there as well. He came up with a lot of the finishes that y'all saw, a lot of the angles that you saw. He came up with them. Gene Anderson, while he was there, came up with a bunch of stuff that you saw. When Gary Hart was in that territory, Gary Hart came up with what was going on for his part of this stuff. So it wasn't always Ole that took care of everything and handled everything. He usually took care of himself, but that was about the extent of it. Because I remember he said, okay, Ronnie, I'll take care of mine and Ivan's and Tommy Rich's and Wahoo's main event. All right, you take care of the rest of them. That's the way it was done. Dad, most of the time, was the assistant booker for him. If it wasn't him, Bob Armstrong or someone else was there that helped him. But he never will give people credit for that for some reason. Never. They were always the S. Everybody was. Everybody they ever come in contact with. And I'm not saying Ole wasn't great, because he was. Great wrestler, great booker. But as good as he was in the late 70s was as bad as he was in the 80s. He did some horrible stuff right before he closed and everything. I mean, it was some bad booking. Michael Barr asked the question, is that is that the good bookers had good ideals and altered the matches where they were not the same week every week? But yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you had to do that. People weren't going to pay to see the same thing week after week. Richard Hood said, remember, Ole got rid of Hulk Hogan. Well, now, Hulk Hogan was bad at the time. Sterling Golden was horrible.
Yep. Yeah, he was not wrong for getting rid of him. And if he had not gotten rid of him, he never would have went to AWA. He never would have got noticed by Sylvester Stallone. He never would have done that movie. And that movie was a hinge point of Hogan's career.
Yeah.
So, I only done the entire industry a favor by firing him at the time.
Yeah, he did. Well, now when it first did, he sent him to Southeastern Championship Wrestling. That was he sent him there first, and then I think he left from there and went to I don't know where. Maybe he went to Vern from there. I'm not for sure, but maybe because he'd already been to Memphis.
He probably at one point he did go to work for Vince McMahon Sr.
That might have been
when he was managed, and that's when he was managed. Yeah, that was when he was managed by Freddie Blassie.
Who is the best booker today? I'm gonna go and say Jack the Bomber Lord. I think he might be the only booker that's left out there in the rest of them.
No, I'm gonna tell you the guy that's over MLW, Buyer, what I can't think of his name. He does an excellent job up there. He's an actual booker. I love the storylines, the angles that they do up there. I don't like the language. I've said that many times, but the product is solid. And if you're not watching that, give it a shot. I mean, fingers in your ears if it offends you for language, but man, it's a good product.
Richard Hood said Ole was making $750,000 in the 70s, been his booker and worker. I would believe that. I would, because he was probably making $3,000 a week just in the main event matches. Because remember, there wasn't but 14 guys on the card, maybe sometimes 12.
Yep.
Well, the guys had to work for it. Charles said this. He said, Ole asked me, who do you think was running the wrestling? I thought he was going to fall out of his chair backwards when I said Paul Jones. But here's the thing. Ole was a booker. Yes, he booked the shows. But he did not book the towns. He did not take care of the newspaper advertising for the towns. He did not check up in the towns. He did not take care of the TVs and make sure the tapes got to the towns. He did not make sure the insurance was paid for. He didn't do any of those things. He absolutely was only the booker. He did not run the wrestling company. Now, he was a booker and he booked the show, but he did not run the company for a long time. Jim Barnett, Ronnie West, Bobby Simmons, those were the three people for a long period of time that ran the actual day-to-day operations of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Ole did not do that. I know he tries to tell people that he did that, but Ole did not. He booked the territory. He took care of the talent. That's all he did in that time. He did not run. But now when he did finally take over, we know what happened because he didn't understand it because he was never taught how to do that stuff.
Right.
So he was lost. He was absolutely lost. These were the exact words Ole would say. The TV tapes never got to the towns, to the TVs. And he asked this question to Jack Briscoe or Jerry Briscoe. Well, who took care of that? Ronnie took care of that. Well, on Friday, we don't have nothing booked for this day. Who booked the spot shows? Who booked it? Ronnie booked the spot shows. So he didn't understand what was going on a day-to-day basis because he didn't even go to the office. I don't even think he even knew who worked in the office. I don't think he ever went to it. So Ole was great booker, but he never ran a wrestling company until he took over from Jim Barnett, and it did not last. It did not last at all. And I love Ole Anderson. I respect Ole Anderson, but when he says he ran a wrestling company, he ran it at the end from 1983 to 1984. 1 year, the company kind of went belly up. And it would have went belly up regardless of Vince McMahon or not. Business was bad for them at that time. As Ole would tell people, I can lose money with or without you. That was his statement. If you enjoyed this video, give us the big thumbs up. Subscribe to the page. Send all your letters, hate letters of what I said about Ole Anderson to Rodney West and Jack Lord. Go one step further, hit that notification bell. and share the video. Thank
There
you
you
so
go.
much, and we'll see you on the next video. I didn't make no Ole Anderson fans.
Well,
Oh,
I mean,
you didn't say anything wrong.
No, you talked about his booking being all right. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the truth. And Ole was stabilizing for us when he came
Yeah.
in, especially when he did in 1990 with WCW, because it was all out war. He did bring some bit of stability to the company where, I mean, everybody was jockeying for position. Most of the ones that were jockeying for position before Ole got there left when Ole got there because they knew that the game was over.
Let's see. Jack, Brent, and Rodney, when there was a town, the talent did not show up for some reason or other, which happened all the time. Jeez.
Yep.
You're just, I mean, you know it's going to happen. Somebody ain't going to show up. Then what did the booger do, Jack?
Well, I had a tried and true formula that your dad actually taught me. And usually you would have one guy, sometimes two. So you got a match that's going. And you know you need to have 5 or 6, whatever matches you've promised, and you have to deliver that. But almost always you had a tag match. So I would just take 2 guys out of that tag match. I'd have them open up. Then I'd have the heel run in his partner on the finish, the babyface make the save, and we'd set up for the tag match later that match. Now you didn't want to do that all the time, but it was a great way to cover things. But there's all kinds of tricks and stuff you do. If you're short one, you have some guy work twice. Go out and accept the challenge. There's 1,000 ways to cover for it.
Richard Hood asked this question, Rodney and Brent. Didn't Ole give you guys Dad Chattanooga back in 1983? No, Ole did not hire Dad back in 1983. Jim Cornette has told the story that Dad was working there, but he wasn't. Dad was working in Jim Crockett Promotions. He left Jim Crockett Promotions because Jerry Jarrett called him and asked him would he want to come back to Atlanta to work for him. He really wasn't working for Ole. He was actually working for Jerry Jarrett. He did not work for Ole at all. I don't know that he even saw Ole maybe twice in that 6 weeks that he was there. I don't think Dad really cared about seeing Ole at that time because you got to remember he got fired. Him and Les Thatcher got fired the same exact day, and we're going to talk to Les Thatcher. So we'll ask him about that fateful day when they both was fired at the same time. But no, he did not. Ole did not bring him back. It was Jerry Jarrett that brought him back because Dad actually left there and went to work for Jerry Jarrett for how long did he work there, Rodney?
Not very long. It was about a month, maybe at that.
By the way, that was Nick Goulas payoffs, Jerry Jarrett.
Well, it was at that time. Jarrett had enough talent; he could run 2 towns a night, and we were in the B towns, if you will.
Michael,
those towns did good though. I mean, one that we went to was just supercar. I mean, super house at high school.
Yeah, Michael Barr or Brent, did you and Rodney have any boogers help make mention? Yes, we did. A lot of the things that you've seen on Continental, if you saw the IROC with the Danny Davis, Ken Wayne, that whole IROC situation where Robert Fuller and Jimmy Golden, that was Rodney's ideal. That was put on there. There's a ton of things. I can't even remember some of the stuff. A lot of the humongous stuff in Mid-South with him rising up from being beat, hit with something, DDT, and rising up. We came up with that stuff because you would come up with finishes on the way to the towns. I mean, that was just the way it was. You didn't have them. 3 weeks down the right line. I said, okay, tonight, this is what we'll do. I mean, you would just, on the way, you would make the finishes. On the way back, you go, oh, man, that finish with Bill Dundee and so that was horrible. Let's don't do that again. That was bad. And that's how you would book it. Yep. So, and I think that's the reason it was better then because when it was bad, you changed it.
Yep.
Let's see. Sheik kept himself on top into his territory. Yes, Rick, you're right about that.
Probably one of the main reasons it died.
Jack, Michael Barr, do you do your own booking?
Yep. I mean, it's a collaborative effort. The promoter and I, sit down. Sometimes we butt heads. We always come out with what's best for business, though. It's never about ego for me. It doesn't have to be my idea all the time. Yeah, I just have to agree with it, I guess you would say. And I also like to sit down with the guys and tell them not only what they're doing that night, but what we're looking for them long term. And a lot of times, guys have said to me, and I try to leave that door open of, hey, what if we did this? Well, if their idea is better than mine, at the end of the day, it's about selling tickets. It ain't about patting me on the back or stroking my ego, because I don't even want people to know what I do as far as the fans. That has not it means nothing to me. Getting paid is what means something to me.
Michael Barr asked, what gets under my, he says, what gets under my collar is watching today's wrestling. The main event is the first match. It should be the last match. Old Rodney's getting a
Amber Alert.
Amber Alert.
Yeah, let me get that turned off. Sorry about that.
Missing pro wrestling.
Yes.
Charles said he did not know anything about Atlanta wrestling except that Paul Jones was running Atlanta. And for years, Paul Jones and oh man, what was the guy's name that passed away? Gunkel, Ray Gunkel, ran that for years, along with I think it was Buddy. What did Buddy?
84 was there, yeah.
And then he sold it to Herb, and the poor old Herb was left during all. Well, Buddy knew what he was doing. He took advantage of his poor old brother. All right. Let's get this other thing done. We won't go as long with this as we did with the other one, because we'll have to get off here. Going in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pro Wrestling Inside and Out, promoting professional wrestling. What is the difference? How did they promote wrestling back in the territory days, and how is it done now? Well, at some points, I don't know that any independent wrestling show, I'm kind of wondering if they promote all the time. But I believe back years ago, and this is the way it was done, it was very important to have a television program. Without a TV program, you were not going to be successful in the territory days, especially during the time of television. Now, prior to that, all they had to do was run a newspaper ad. Everybody read the newspaper back then. So you put a big ad in the paper and you said that, let's say Frank Gotch was going against Joe Stetcher, probably going to be a sellout if people thought about the show and wanted to buy a ticket to see the show. As years went by, especially when television came along, it was very important as a territory system. If you didn't have a television show, you probably wasn't going to be successful at that time, especially when television hit. It was, in some instances, Dothan, Alabama is a very good, I guess, if we was going to say an example of this. Dothan, Alabama had a higher share of people watching wrestling than watched the news. That's how big wrestling was on television in Dothan, Alabama. And the power of that television was very important. We were there several times when they do a major angle on television, and we've seen the power of television. And the power of television back in those days, and this was 1983, they did a thing with Lord Humongous and Ron Fuller. They built this thing up for how many weeks was this, Rodney?
Probably about 4.
For about 4 weeks, they make this big deal. Lord Humongous is always messing up, or he's doing something wrong. And Ron Fuller comes on television and tells everybody that they had better tune in today because he's going to show how to discipline the children.
That's right.
And they do the angle. And how many people, Rodney, do you think the week prior to this, how many people were at
you probably had about 1,000 people at the farm center.
Very next week, they shoot the angle on television. Lord Humongous picks them up, chokes them. The guys come out. Bob Armstrong comes out. He makes the match, changes the match. Lord Humongous against Ron Fuller at the Houston County Farm Center. Tonight, the matches have changed and went from 1,000 to over 5,000 people. 1 week. 1 week. The power of television. It was very important to have television program back then. Without it, you had no way to tell your story. You had no way of developing your talent. And people ask, well, did they do radio advertising? No, Didn't do a lot of radio advertising back in the territory days. They did start doing radio advertising in 1984 in Mid-South Wrestling. Jim Ross brought that to the table. Jim Ross had an advertising agency. I don't know if, I'm guessing he got his 10 or 15% back from whatever he spent, but they started buying radio advertising in that territory, and it helped it. And I believe he might have been the first person to really use it big time in that territory. They kind of knew who was coming to the matches, and they were matching it up, and they were doing really good with that. But if you look at Georgia, I don't think Georgia Championship Wrestling ever used any radio.
Nope.
They did buy a newspaper ad, though, every week. And sadly, because they wanted it in the Saturday paper or the Sunday paper, they usually would tell the people what the matches was. So, they had to smarten up the the editors of the newspaper. But they wanted it in there. They wanted it in the next day, or they wanted it in on the Sunday paper. They wanted to make sure that those people, because back then they were reading that paper. Today they just line their cat litter box with it. But back then people actually read the newspaper. And they didn't buy other television advertising because the television was their platform. Now, Jack, I'll throw this at you because you just done a show, Wrestle South. By the way, if you've not went to it, it's WrestleSouth.com. They just ran a match as of this. It was Saturday, May 8th. Jack, what did y'all do in advertising a little different, because you don't have a television product? So how did you do your advertising to get that?
No, well, we did, of course, posters, but you have to do posters that are eye-catching now, so that because people really, people are busy. They don't pay attention, so you got to put out something that's going to catch their eye. We did a lot of posters. We did a lot of handbills at different stores that would allow us to put them up on the counter by the registers. We got a tremendous response out of that. We did several thousand of those, and we did radio. Now, radio is not commonly something we would think about doing, but in Arab, the radio station is owned by Michael St. John. And of course, we all love Michael St. John. And Michael not only gave us a great deal, but Michael knew when to insert those commercials for us and do those ticket giveaways at the right time when he had the most listeners. He didn't waste our time, by putting us on at midnight, because nobody's listening to radio at midnight. We were drive time morning, we were lunch break, we were afternoon drive times. He knew where to hit us. So that was a tremendous help. We got a lot of people off of that. But social media has changed the entire perspective of what we do here. And almost, I would say 75% of what we drew still came because they saw the social media. They saw that, we bought advertisement and targeted it to that. I think it was a 15-mile area. That's what the last thing I did. I had done it statewide at one point, but the last series of advertisement I did, we targeted to just a 15-mile area, and it hit, I want to say it was like 10,000 people, specifically, because it lets you, if anybody likes anything to do with professional wrestling, it showed up in their newsfeed. So, there's social media has changed the way everybody advertises. Now, eventually we're working towards getting a show going. But again, we're going to limit what we show. You're not going to be able to sit at home and see a Wrestle South show in its entirety. You'll see bits and pieces. You're going to see interviews that we do, promos, and, enough to get you enticed to come out and buy a ticket. But if you want to see the Wrestle South show, you're going to have to come see the Wrestle South show.
And wrestling is made to be a live show.
Yeah.
It is made to be a live show. It's not a television product. You just don't get that same effect on that. Rodney, now wrestling, they did posters. Well, back years ago, they did posters, but only for the spot shows.
Right. Because that's because of the power of that TV show. Yep. And they invested a lot in the TV show. Many of the markets would pick a local personality actually to host the show. Dothan, Alabama, for years were hosted by local personality there. Charlie Platt was one of those personalities that became big. Sterling Brewer in Birmingham, Harry Thornton was a huge morning show, talk show host, hosted it for years and probably the top rated morning show in the whole, but it was locally based. And every one of these shows were locally based. And I think one of our insiders was talking about as far as Dothan, the formula was destroyed. And that wasn't just Dothan that happened. That was in a lot of the places. Having an established arena that you were at every week was also very helpful. Which, you know, that would be difficult today to book. I mean, there were to be some arenas, but a lot of the arenas that occasionally I still play wrestling, so I have to go and see what kind of bookings are, what's going on in these different shows in these arenas, and there's just not a place where you could do weekly events. It's not the dates are not available. I was just doing this before the pandemic took place, but yeah. We're talking about local personality in Memphis. I mean, Lance Russell and Dave Brown. Lance Russell, newspaper. Dave Brown, weatherman on Channel 5. They were important. They were very important. And establishing that show is very important. And like I said, having weekly events also very important in developing those shows. That was part of the advertisement.
And developing the characters that you saw, or as that, and we did not call them characters, by the way. You were wrestlers. You know, you develop a wrestler. You would actually get one over. That basically what you're saying. We've got to get Tommy Rich over. Yep. That was the whole deal. And for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, you're going to get Tommy Rich over. That was the most important thing for you to do, is get Tommy Rich over. If Ted DiBiase came in, okay, we got to get Ted DiBiase over. And they knew how to get him over, which I don't know that professional wrestling, especially the big organizations, know how to get people over. I'm not for sure they even understand the concept of getting somebody over, and they should, because if you watch Star Trek, they do get Captain Picard over. Mm-hmm. I mean, they do get him over. They do get the Borg over, so they do have the concept. They just, for some reason, don't use it in the writing of professional wrestling. But as far as promoting, it was completely different. It's a different concept today than it was then.
Sure.
Because today, you've got so much that people, so many ways to connect with people today, and a lot of people doing some great stuff. Russell South, about 400 people, 420, somewhere around there, at the show Saturday night. Just a spectacular crowd. Wrestling is on its way back. Pro wrestling is on its way back, I believe. I think that WWE they'll always be there. I don't think they'll ever go anywhere, but I think pro wrestling is on its way back. If you enjoyed this video, give us the big thumbs up, subscribe to the page, go one step further, hit that notification bell, and share the video. Until the next video, thank you so much. We'll see you on the next one. Let's see here. Where was I at?
Let's see. It was.
Let's see here.
All the way up. Let's see. It's quite a bit up.
Man.
Michael Barr, that's good management. Jackie's talking about his booking, sitting down with your crew and coming up with ideas. Then I think that's where we were left off.
All right, so we're at Charles. It was called ABC Promotions. Stuart Kemp said that Michael Barr remembered WWF 1980 when the main event was inserted into intermission or around there, and then they have some matches in the main event, usually championship matches. You know, the reason they did that, they had a curfew.
Yep.
Okay.
You know, so they wanted to make sure that main event got in before the curfew hit. You know, that's Michael Barr. Algama each was a bit different. Never understood why they did that. Robert Grice said they put on a quality show. Jack left us again. People watch as children until they watch with their grandchildren. Yes, that was wrestling. It was unbelievable how many people watched on television.
It was a family affair. I mean, you had several generations come together to the shows. Grandparents, parents, and their children all came together.
Brent, I understand that television back then in Delta and other parts of the country well, Dothan were farmers and people got most of their information. Yes, and the thing about it is wrestling was over back then. It was the thing. Actually, people would quit what they were doing on Saturdays at 5 o'clock to watch wrestling.
Yep.
Wrestling was king in Dothan for years until they screwed up the formula. I think leaving television in Dothan was a horrible idea. I don't think that was a smart idea. They should have done Dothan and Condon.
Yes, should have been both. Should have kept both shows, especially because I'm thinking it was only like $500 for that production, and that's well worth the advertisement that you were going to have to do for the show anyway to keep that formula going. That show in Dothan was just not going to work in Birmingham, and it wasn't going to work in Knoxville anymore. I mean, the TV stations and both markets were saying that production will not go here. You're going to have to make improvements.
Television, the point in time, you can put over. Yeah, they would do some advertising for them as well. I grew up watching the Sheiks promotion, and back then it was only 1 day a week, even Saturday, and they came to town every other week. Michael Barr, Jack Brent did it took a good announcer for television? Yes.
Yes.
I think it was very
important.
Oh, yeah. Very key.
And you had to have people with credibility in those positions. You just couldn't take any,
Well, Wrestle South, our announcer is the host of the local ESPN sports radio show. So,
sure.
He brought a lot of folks in for us.
Robert Gross said they are trying to relaunch wrestling in Dothan, and I hope they do well with it.
Is that, Robert, is that the WWA, I think? I'm not sure if the Continental reunion or revival show or whatever. I'm not sure if they're going back or not. I hadn't heard.
Could television, Dover, Birmingham, Abraham, any place help bring these promotions back to the areas and fans? Well, yes, it's going to happen. I believe there's going to be. I think people are looking for pro wrestling. I think they are wanting to see pro wrestling. I think they've seen the entertainment. I think they've seen the entertainment business. Now they want to see wrestling. Yep. I think it's important to produce wrestling. Stuart Kemp said, if you use local celebs having no idea how to announce the right names, weights, that can be bad. But who buy this ticket many times, audiences don't forgive wrong announcements. Yes, we've seen that happen.
Yep.
We've seen that happen many times. I remember now. I will be honest. Anytime we used it, Rodney used to work with the people. He would work with all the announcers and tell them exactly. He wrote it down.
That's what I did with their guy the other night.
They can read script, so that's what I did. I wrote,
and he would tell them how to do it too.
Word from word, exactly how I wanted.
Yep, I write their cards out, and then I sit down with them and tell them how to pronounce the guys' names, whole 9 yards. The only thing they're responsible for is going to those guys and getting the weight in hometown, because I'm not keeping up with that.
Hey, make sure you get their weights wrong, right and wrong, because if they don't, they'll get mad. At one time on the Sheiks TV show, his broadcaster was Ernie Roth, a.k.a. the Grand Wizard.
Wow.
Richard Hood said wrestling likeness is regional. Let's see. Michael Barr, Brent Rodney, but the elders that liked it back then are gone now. They're still
but they're still out there. I mean, I think the family unit has been ignored. Everybody's worried about that young demographic. That's the reason they're doing the language. That's the reason they're doing the wild stuff. And they've forgotten that there's still parents out there that want to bring their kids. There's grandparents that want to, bring their kids, grandkids involved in, and seeing what they used to love back in the day. And that's where we're banking everything we do at Wrestle South. It's a family-oriented show, totally.
Yeah, and it should be. It should be. Wrestling always was, and it should be. Yep. They tried popping in the program, and wrestling flopped. I think he's probably talking about they brought the Continental show and put it into Dothan. I think that was wrong. Brent, Jack, and Rodney, what would either of you do to bring wrestling back to television? Your ideals? We don't have time right now to talk about it, but I think that would probably be something we need to talk about probably on a future show, because we are running out of time. We were actually 17 minutes over the time we're supposed to be. But let's see, Jack, it is something related to CCW.
Well, then they should do good. I like the guys at WWA. I just think they have a lot of work to do on their product.
Richard Hood said the little old lady taunting the O's with something else. Yeah, on WWF.
that.
Have you seen that? She one time, was that Mr. Fuji threw some, he did the powder thing, and she got down there and did you see that? She rubbed that. Oh, she was magnificent.
Yeah, at some point I have to tell you my Hat Pin Annie story of a show in Mississippi that involved Bambi and Peggy Lee sometime.
But there was an old lady like that in every town.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we had them every town. And there was
we called them Hat Pin Annies.
Yeah,
that name I always heard.
That old lady in Chattanooga. You got close to her, she would hit you with that purse.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Dundee said, "Watch this. I'm gonna get over there next to her," and he did. She took that purse, and I mean, all you heard is a big pop. And
we had one in Gunnersville where I started at, and she had a brick in her purse.
Yes,
had nothing else, just a brick.
Well, that lady in Chattanooga had a brick in hers, so she.
Stuart is right. The old purse ladies were great additions to the event. Yes, they were. Michael Barr, Fannie Mae was one that worked with Bullet Bob Armstrong. Yes, Fannie Mae Titweiler, I think was her name. Richard Hood said it's simple. Bring back wrestling by disapproving disbelief. Yep. I agree with you. Robert Gross says he watches with his grandson. And pro wrestling, it's on its way back. And I think WE and the rest of these will eventually find out when these independent groups start drawing some great crowds and great houses, they'll go, maybe.
Yeah, at some point, I think it's going to be great when WWE starts emulating us instead of all these shows trying to beat WWE.
I'm seeing myself, and of course, I fast forward through a lot of the show now, but I'm seeing a difference. I'm seeing some difference in those shows. I'm really liking the Randy Orton Jr. and Riddler matches now. I'm thinking those are very good. That step is really, I think, really catching on. And I have found by not listening to the commentary that I enjoy the show much better.
Yeah.
The commentary really is over the top beyond anything I can ever imagine. I'm not sure if I wouldn't produce that show using the same announcers, but then have another channel with different announcers approaching it in a different way. Because I think they actually take away the announcers, that the commentators are actually taken away from the action.
Yeah,
I really
agree with that.
All right, guys, we want to thank you so much for supporting us. We certainly do appreciate it. We've got a lot of things coming up next week. We'll tell you exactly what we got going on Friday, October 4th, and also. There was, I went blank. I just went blank. It's 9:21. It's about time to go to sleep. But we'll let everybody know that we got a lot of stuff planned, and we certainly do appreciate you supporting the channel. We certainly appreciate it, and we will see everybody next week. We'll see you on Monday. We're going to, I think I have it wrote down right here what we're going to do, and I actually brought it with me. Next week we're going to talk. We're going to read a thing that Paul Harvey did back years ago. No numbers to call tonight. No.
I didn't cut it off like I did last week.
But we'll also talk a little bit more about Wrestle South next week. We'll talk a little bit about that during our live stream as well, and then the plans we have going on, and the world champion. I am asleep. Is the show over? We put you to sleep. Well, at least we're good for something. And we're going to look at more programs and stuff. We're going to do that. I got some. I've got some pictures from the Terry Gordy Memorial Show.
Now, Rick, Monday's show will start at 7 for all the insiders. Starting 7 o'clock on Monday.
Yeah, 7 o'clock, and we'll do 25 minutes, and then we'll go do the live show. Then we'll come back and do some more. All right, guys, thank you all so much. We will see everybody next week. Have a great week. Have a great weekend, and hopefully we don't have to walk everywhere we go between. So we'll see everybody next week.